The human princess was meant to be safe. Instead, she led the charge. The morning sun reflected off the silver towers and the streets, where citizens walked briskly toward their work. From up here it looked peaceful, almost like any other day. Yet deep inside, Lyra knew that peace was fragile. Reports of the Viren Dominion had been growing more frequent, and intelligence officers had warned that the alien fleet might strike sooner than anyone expected. Lyra had been trained for this moment in theory, but never in reality. She was meant to remain inside the palace walls, protected by layers of guards and by the strategies of human generals who had fought wars before her birth. That was her role as a princess, to be safe, to sit behind her golden walls and watch others risk their lives. But the thought of hiding while her people faced danger made her chest tighten. She could not accept it. Her father, King Alaric, believed in her safety above all else. He had allowed her to study politics, history, and diplomacy, but he never imagined she would take interest in military strategies. Yet Lyra spent countless hours with the generals, quietly observing maps, battle simulations, and training exercises. She asked questions that even seasoned officers found difficult to answer. Why defend one sector when the enemy could strike another? Why wait for reinforcements when a calculated attack could disrupt their plans? Lyra had no title in the army, and she had no authority to command, yet her curiosity and insight had grown sharp. She began walking among the soldiers during drills, wearing a simple uniform so that no one would immediately recognize her. She learned how to handle weapons, how to move silently across the training fields, and how to think like the soldiers who would fight for her kingdom. Some nights, she stayed up late, reading intercepted messages and analyzing alien tactics. She discovered patterns that the generals had overlooked. She could see where the Viren fleet would likely attack first and where the human defenses were weakest. She sketched diagrams, mapped routes, and even calculated the timing of reinforcements. Her mind moved fast, and her determination grew stronger every day. One morning, a message arrived from the intelligence network. The Viren fleet had been detected just beyond the outer rim, moving faster than predicted. The council immediately gathered in the palace war room, their faces pale with concern. General Kale, the head of the military, addressed the council. "We expected them in 2 weeks. They could arrive in less than 48 hours. Our forces are ready, but the initial strike could be devastating." The council members murmured among themselves, weighing options and debating strategy. Some suggested evacuation of civilians. Others insisted on holding their positions. King Alaric's hand rested on the table as he listened quietly, glancing at Lyra, who stood at the edge of the room. "Father," she spoke softly, yet with a clarity that drew the attention of everyone present, "evacuation will not protect the city. The Viren Dominion's first strike will target key power stations and communication centers. If we lose them, the city will collapse before anyone can escape." A hush fell over the room. The generals exchanged surprised glances, unused to a princess giving tactical advice. "Princess," General Kale said carefully, "you are wise, but this is not your place. You are meant to be safe here." Lyra's eyes met her father's. "I will not hide while others fight. I must do something." Her words were not mere rebellion, they carried a weight of reason. She explained her calculations, her observations of the alien fleet's patterns, and her proposed defensive strategy. The generals listened, some skeptical, others quietly impressed. King Alaric's expression was torn between fear for his daughter and pride in her courage. "You may be brave," he said finally, "but bravery alone cannot protect you. You must stay here." "I cannot," Lyra replied, her voice steady. "I can help plan the defense and I can help lead the charge if necessary. I have studied. I am ready." The room fell silent. No one could argue with her determination. Her words sparked a seed of hope, and some soldiers began to whisper that perhaps this princess was not as fragile as the world assumed. That night, Lyra returned to her private chambers. She removed her royal gown and donned a simple combat uniform she had secretly prepared. Strapped across her back was a compact energy rifle she had been learning to use. She moved quietly through the palace halls, avoiding the guards, making her way to the training fields. The soldiers there were exhausted from a long day of drills, but Lyra's presence startled them. One of them stepped forward, raising a hand in surprise. "Princess Lyra, what are you doing here?" she smiled faintly. "Learning, fighting, preparing. I cannot stand by while our city is in danger." They watched in silence as she picked up a weapon and began training with precision and focus. Her movements were careful, but confident. She mimicked the soldiers' techniques while adding her own instinctive creativity. Even the instructors could not hide their surprise. Over the next several hours, Lyra pushed herself harder than anyone else. She ran obstacle courses, practiced tactical maneuvers, and memorized the layouts of the city from ground level. Each drill made her stronger, faster, and more aware of her surroundings. She learned to anticipate enemy movements, to think like the Viren Dominion, and to spot weak points in her own defenses. By dawn, she was exhausted, but her resolve had only grown. The city below was quiet, unaware of the threat approaching faster than they imagined. She returned to her chambers, heart racing, knowing that time was slipping away. The next day, Lyra attended another council meeting. She carried herself with a calm confidence that drew the attention of everyone present. "We do not have the luxury of waiting," she said. "The Viren fleet will arrive before reinforcements can reach us. We must act decisively and protect our key positions. And I am willing to lead a strike team if it will help." General Kale shook his head. "It is too dangerous, Princess. We cannot risk your life." Lyra's gaze did not waver. "If I am meant to be safe, that safety means nothing if the kingdom falls. I will not sit behind walls while our people fight alone. I will fight with them." Her words sparked murmurs among the council. Some looked concerned, others impressed. Her bravery and clarity had a strange effect. Fear transformed into hope. Soldiers whispered of a princess who was willing to risk herself for the people, and those whispers began to travel through the ranks. That afternoon, Lyra visited the armory in secret. She studied the weapons, checked supplies, and familiarized herself with the terrain outside the palace. Every step she took, every map she reviewed, strengthened her knowledge and her resolve. She began devising small, daring plans for reconnaissance missions, ways to gather intelligence from the Viren Dominion before the main attack. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of true responsibility, not the comfort of titles and ceremonies, but the responsibility for the lives of thousands. She understood the fear that soldiers felt, and she also understood the courage it took to stand in the face of overwhelming odds. That night, Lyra stood on the balcony, looking at the stars above Ardessa Prime. The first ships of the Viren fleet were already visible in the distance, tiny dots of light moving steadily toward the city. Her heart raced, but fear did not control her. She felt something stronger: determination, clarity, and a fierce desire to protect her home. She whispered to herself, "I was meant to be safe, but if I do nothing, there will be no one left to protect." Lyra spent the rest of the night preparing. She reviewed strategies, memorized terrain maps, and coordinated secret communication channels with a few trusted soldiers. She planned for every contingency she could imagine, and she trained herself to react quickly to anything unexpected. By the first light of morning, she was ready. The city below remained peaceful, unaware of the danger approaching faster than anyone had anticipated. Yet Princess Lyra was no longer just a symbol. She was ready to become a leader, to fight alongside her people, and to prove that humanity's strength lay not in hiding, but in courage, intelligence, and determination. As the sun rose, reflecting off the towers of Ardessa Prime, Lyra took a deep breath and prepared for the first day of a battle that would change everything. She was no longer merely a princess. She was a force that would rally her people and face the Viren Dominion head-on. The city of Ardessa Prime remained quiet in the early hours of the morning, but the calm was deceptive. Princess Lyra could feel it in the air, the tension that came before a storm. From her private balcony, she could see the first outlines of the Viren fleet slowly appearing against the distant stars. They were massive ships, dark and angular, each one bristling with weapons that humans could barely imagine. Despite the fear that gripped the palace, Lyra felt no hesitation. Instead, she felt a sharp clarity, as if her mind had been preparing for this moment for a lifetime. She quickly moved to the war room, where General Kale and a few trusted officers had gathered. The generals were tense, their faces lined with worry, but Lyra's presence seemed to bring a strange calm. She unrolled her maps and began pointing out positions, routes, and weak points that she had studied for days. "Their initial strike will target the power grids," she said. "If we do not protect them, the city will fall into chaos within hours. We need to split our forces. I can lead a strike team to disrupt their front line and delay their attack while the main defense organizes." Kale opened his mouth, ready to protest, but Lyra did not wait for permission. "I have trained with the soldiers. I know their routines, their strengths, and their weaknesses. I will not hide while our people face the enemy. Let me lead. Let me prove that we can survive this attack." The generals exchanged uneasy glances. They had never imagined a princess taking such a role in a battle. Yet there was something in Lyra's voice, a mixture of calm intelligence and fierce determination, that made them pause. King Alaric entered the room then, his expression a mixture of fear and pride. "Lyra, this is not your place. You must stay here. You are my daughter, and I cannot allow you to risk your life in battle." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "Father, if I stay here, the city will fall. I cannot stand behind walls while our people fight alone. I will not be a princess hiding in safety while the Viren Dominion destroys everything we have built." Her words hung in the room. No one could argue with the honesty and courage in her voice. Finally, Kale nodded reluctantly. "If you insist, Princess, then we will plan around it, but understand this will be dangerous, beyond anything you have faced in training." Lyra gave a small nod. Danger did not frighten her. The thought of doing nothing terrified her far more. By midday, preparations were underway. Lyra moved among the soldiers, not as a distant royal figure but as one of them. She reviewed their equipment, checked weapons, and walked through the city streets to understand the terrain better. Soldiers whispered among themselves, some in awe, others in disbelief. They had heard stories of a princess who was courageous, but few had imagined her walking the same streets, learning the same routes, and preparing to face the enemy alongside them. Lyra noticed the smallest details: the narrow alleyways where ambushes could be set, the buildings that could provide cover, and the energy conduits that, if protected, could power the city's defenses. Every observation she made would be crucial in the coming hours. As evening approached, the first Viren ships entered the outer atmosphere. Sensors blared warnings throughout the city. Lyra stood at the command center, watching the displays with unflinching focus. The alien ships moved in a formation designed to intimidate, to confuse, and to strike before the humans could react. Yet Lyra saw patterns others missed. She pointed to a cluster of ships that she predicted would strike the southern energy hub first. "Prepare a defensive perimeter there," she ordered. "Use the automated turrets, but position our soldiers to flank any survivors. We need to slow them down before they reach the city center." Soldiers moved quickly, following her instructions with surprising efficiency. Even the generals were impressed by how Lyra's decisions translated into action. When the first attack came, it was swift and brutal. The Viren ships unleashed energy beams that tore through the outer defenses. Explosions rocked the streets, and alarms rang across the city. Civilians ran for cover, while soldiers took their positions. Lyra remained calm, moving through the command center to give orders, relay information, and personally check on the frontline units. Her presence inspired those around her. Soldiers who had been frightened minutes before now moved with confidence, knowing that the princess herself had not hesitated to face the danger. They followed her instructions with precision, using her insights to anticipate the alien attacks. Lyra then made her first bold move. She led a small strike team out of the palace, moving under the cover of buildings and debris. Their mission was to disrupt a V-Rin squad attempting to breach the city's communication tower. The team moved quickly and quietly, taking positions behind crates and walls, waiting for the right moment. When the alien forces appeared, Lyra gave the signal. The soldiers advanced with coordinated precision. Energy rifles fired, explosions detonated, and within minutes, the V-Rin squad was forced to retreat. Lyra's strike team had successfully delayed the enemy, buying precious time for the city's main defenses to adjust. Back at the command center, General Kale watched the operation unfold on his screens. She's leading them like a veteran," he muttered. "I've never seen anything like this." Lyra returned to the command center, sweaty and exhausted, but her eyes shone with determination. "We cannot stop now," she said. "The V-Rin fleet is larger than expected, and this is just the beginning. We need to predict their next move and strike before they regroup." Over the next several hours, the battle intensified. Lyra moved constantly, coordinating soldiers, reinforcing weak points, and leading small missions that disrupted alien operations. Each time she returned, her presence brought hope and courage to those who fought alongside her. The citizens of Ardessa Prime, witnessing the princess's bravery, felt their own fear replaced with determination. The V-Rin Dominion was relentless. Their ships and soldiers pushed harder, attempting to break through the human defenses. Yet Lyra's strategies were proving effective. By predicting enemy movements, using the terrain to her advantage, and inspiring her soldiers, she had turned what could have been chaos into organized resistance. During a brief pause in the fighting, Lyra surveyed the city from a rooftop. Smoke rose from damaged buildings, and the sound of distant energy blasts echoed through the streets. Soldiers and civilians alike were exhausted, yet their spirits remained unbroken. Lyra's presence had changed the tide of morale. People no longer saw her as a princess to be protected. They saw her as a leader, someone willing to share their danger and fight for them directly. Her mind, however, never stopped analyzing. She calculated every movement, estimated enemy reinforcements, and adjusted strategies on the fly. Every decision was a balance of risk and reward, each one critical to protecting the city and her people. As night fell, the V-Rin Dominion attempted a larger assault on the city center. Lyra organized a defense that used every advantage she could find. Soldiers were positioned on rooftops, behind barricades, and in strategic choke points. Automated turrets and energy shields were synchronized with human movements to create a deadly network of defenses. When the alien forces arrived, they were met with unexpected resistance. Lyra personally led a squad to a key junction, where she coordinated fire, directed troop movements, and made split-second decisions that allowed the humans to repel the attack. The battle was fierce, but Lyra's leadership prevented the city from falling. After hours of fighting, the first wave of the V-Rin attack was finally pushed back. Soldiers cheered, exhausted but alive, while civilians began emerging from shelters. Lyra, her uniform scorched and her face streaked with dirt, stood among her people. She was not unscathed, but her eyes reflected resolve and triumph. General Kale approached her, his expression a mix of awe and relief. "Princess, you were right. Your presence made all the difference. The soldiers fought harder because of you. Ardessa Prime still stands because of your leadership." Lyra shook her head. "It was not just me. Every soldier, every citizen played a part. I only did what I could. The fight is far from over. The Viren Dominion will return and we must be ready. That night, as the city began repairs and survivors tended to the wounded, Lyra walked through the streets. She spoke to soldiers, comforted citizens, and ensured that the city's defenses were stronger than before. She was no longer a princess meant to stay safe. She was a leader, a symbol of humanity's courage, and a force that would stand against any threat. For the first time, Lyra felt the weight of responsibility not as a burden but as a purpose. The battle had tested her, challenged her, and proven her strength. She knew that the war was far from over, but she also knew that humans, when united and led with courage, could stand against the greatest of enemies. As she looked to the stars, now filled with the retreating shapes of alien ships, Lyra whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning. If we fight together, we will survive. And I will lead them every step of the way." The sun had barely risen over Ardessa Prime when Princess Lyra stepped onto the balcony of the palace, surveying the city. The streets below were quiet now, but the calm was temporary. The first wave of the Viren Dominion had been pushed back, yet intelligence reports indicated that reinforcements were already on their way. This second wave would be larger, faster, and more ruthless. Lyra felt a cold clarity settle over her. This was the true test. Soldiers moved through the city, repairing barricades and tending to their wounded comrades. Civilians helped wherever they could, clearing debris and securing vital supply routes. Even though fear lingered, there was a sense of hope that had been absent before. That hope had a single source: Lyra. The princess who had once been sheltered behind walls was now the very symbol of courage for the city. Lyra called for a meeting in the palace war room. Maps were spread across the table, and holographic displays of the Viren fleet appeared as tiny glowing dots approaching the atmosphere. General Kale and his officers stood around her, watching as she traced their likely paths. "Their reinforcements are coming from two separate fleets," she said. "One will attempt a frontal assault on the central district. The other will try to flank from the east, near the industrial zone. We cannot defend every street, but we can control the points where they will have the greatest impact." Kale nodded slowly. "And how do you suggest we handle the eastern flank?" Lyra's eyes narrowed in thought. "We will use the industrial buildings to funnel them into a trap. Turrets, barricades, and our soldiers will force them into narrow streets. They will be exposed, and we can strike them with precision. I will lead the strike team personally. We cannot leave this to chance." The generals were silent. They had been trained to rely on strategy and numbers, yet here was a young princess who had never held official command, planning maneuvers that rivaled their own expertise. King Alaric, standing quietly at the back, placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. His voice was low, filled with concern. "Lyra, I cannot allow you to risk your life. You have already done more than anyone could expect. Please stay here." Lyra turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. "Father, I am not asking for permission. I am stating what must be done. If I stay behind, lives will be lost. If I act, we have a chance to turn the tide." He sighed, a mixture of fear and admiration in his eyes. "Then I must trust your judgment. Be careful." By mid-morning, the city was buzzing with activity. Soldiers took positions, civilians moved supplies, and automated defenses were checked one last time. Lyra moved among them, offering words of encouragement and inspecting every barricade personally. She knew every street, every building, every alleyway, because she had walked them countless times in preparation. The sky darkened as the second wave of the Viren Dominion entered the atmosphere. Their ships were larger than before, bristling with weaponry and moving with a precision that hinted at intelligence far beyond human understanding. Energy beams cut through the sky, striking buildings and barricades, as the battle began in earnest. Lyra led her strike team through the industrial zone, moving under cover of machinery and smoke. She had planned every step meticulously, anticipating the enemy's moves. When the first Viren soldiers appeared, her team struck with coordinated precision. Energy rifles fired, and explosive charges detonated, forcing the aliens into narrow streets where human soldiers could surround them. Even in the chaos of battle, Lyra's mind remained sharp. She gave clear orders, adjusted positions, and reacted to threats faster than anyone else in the field. Soldiers around her were inspired by her courage. They fought not only because they were trained, but because they believed in the princess who fought alongside them. Hours passed and the battle escalated. The Viren Dominion's numbers were overwhelming, yet Lyra's strategies continued to work. She anticipated their movements, used the terrain to her advantage, and directed her soldiers with precision. She even managed to cut off a squad of enemy reinforcements, forcing them to surrender rather than continue their assault. Back at the command center, General Kale watched the battle unfold through the displays. "She is extraordinary," he muttered. "I have never seen anyone lead like this, let alone a princess." Lyra's mind, however, was focused entirely on the fight. She knew that the city's survival depended not on bravery alone, but on calculated decisions. She coordinated with other strike teams, sharing information about enemy positions and predicting where the next attack would come. Her ability to see the battlefield as a whole, while also focusing on individual skirmishes, allowed her to stay one step ahead of the Viren Dominion. As night fell, Lyra realized that the enemy was attempting a desperate maneuver, a direct assault on the palace itself. The Viren fleet sent a squad of heavily armed soldiers through the streets, aiming to bypass human defenses and strike the heart of the city. Lyra knew that if they reached the palace, the entire command structure could collapse and morale would plummet. Without hesitation, she gathered a team of her best soldiers and moved to intercept. They navigated the streets carefully, using shadows and debris as cover. When the Viren soldiers appeared, Lyra gave the signal. The human team struck with deadly precision, catching the enemy off guard. Energy beams flew, and within minutes the Viren squad was neutralized. Lyra's actions sent a message to both sides. The humans were not weak, and their leader would not hide. Soldiers on the battlefield were reinvigorated, and the Viren Dominion began to show signs of hesitation. For the first time, they were meeting not just resistance, but intelligent and fearless opposition. The fight continued throughout the night. Lyra moved tirelessly, checking positions, directing fire, and leading small but decisive operations that disrupted the enemy's plans. Every time she returned from the field, she inspired awe and courage among her soldiers. Civilians, watching from safe areas, began to understand that this was no ordinary battle. The humans were fighting with strategy, determination, and heart. At one point, Lyra discovered that a section of the city's defenses had been compromised. She immediately gathered a small squad and moved to reinforce it. The Viren Dominion attempted to push through, but Lyra anticipated their movements and organized a counterattack. Using the buildings as cover, her team forced the aliens into a tight corridor where automated turrets and energy shields created a deadly trap. The alien forces were forced to retreat once again, suffering heavy losses. Hours of continuous battle began to take a toll. Lyra's body was exhausted, her uniform scorched, and her hands blistered from gripping weapons. Yet her spirit remained unbroken. She refused to retreat or rest, knowing that every decision could save lives. Her presence was a beacon for those around her, a reminder that courage and intelligence could overcome even overwhelming odds. By the early hours of the morning, the second wave of the Viren Dominion had been pushed back, though not without cost. Buildings were damaged and many soldiers were wounded, but the city had held. Lyra stood among her people, surveying the battlefield. She was tired, yet her eyes burned with determination. This victory was significant, but she knew the fight was far from over. General Kale approached her, his expression a mixture of respect and disbelief. "Princess, your leadership has changed everything. The soldiers followed you willingly and the enemy is retreating. I cannot believe what I have witnessed." Lyra shook her head. "It was not me alone. Every soldier, every civilian who helped played a part. The Viren Dominion is strong, but humans are stronger when we fight together." Even King Alaric, who had feared for her safety, now understood that his daughter had become something extraordinary. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have shown courage beyond measure, Lyra. I am proud of you, though I still wish you would be safe." Lyra smiled faintly. "Safety is meaningless if people are suffering. I will continue to fight as long as I am needed." As dawn broke over Ardessa Prime, the city began to recover. Soldiers rebuilt barricades, repaired energy conduits, and tended to the wounded. Civilians cleared rubble and helped wherever they could. The battle had been fierce, yet the spirit of the city remained unbroken. Lyra walked through the streets, speaking to soldiers and citizens alike. She offered encouragement, checked on defensive positions, and ensured that everyone knew the next steps. She was no longer a princess meant to be protected. She was a leader, a symbol of courage, and a living proof that humanity could rise against any enemy. Looking to the horizon, Lyra saw the retreating shapes of the Viren fleet. Her heart was steady and her mind sharp. She knew that this was only the beginning. The Viren Dominion would return, stronger and more determined, but the humans of Ardessa Prime had shown that they could stand together, fight intelligently, and survive. Lyra whispered to herself, her voice carrying both resolve and promise. "We have held today, but the fight is not over. I will lead them, and together we will face whatever comes next. Humanity will not hide. Humanity will not yield." The morning air over Ardessa Prime was tense, but alive with determination. The city had survived 2 waves of the Viren Dominion, but the reports were clear. The main force of the alien fleet was approaching, larger and more organized than anything the humans had faced. Princess Lyra stood on the balcony of the palace, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The faint glimmer of the enemy ships reflected in her eyes, yet she felt no fear. This was the moment she had prepared for her entire life. She turned to the generals and soldiers assembled behind her. "Today, the Viren Dominion will attempt to break our city. They will think they can strike fear into our hearts. They will be wrong. We fight together and we will stand. Every street, every barricade, every person matters. We are humans and we do not give up." The soldiers straightened, pride and courage swelling in their chests. For the first time, fear was no longer their companion. Instead, they felt a burning determination to follow the princess who had fought beside them, who had shared every danger, and who had refused to be safe while they faced death. Lyra moved quickly, coordinating defensive positions across the city. She had studied every street, every building, and every possible approach the aliens could take. Her plan was bold. Instead of waiting for the enemy to attack, she would lead a counteroffensive, striking at the Viren Dominion's flanks before they could surround the city. The first wave of the alien assault hit the outer districts just as she had predicted. Energy beams cut through the streets, and explosions shook buildings, but human defenses held. Lyra led a strike team through the industrial sector, moving under cover of smoke and debris. Every move she made was precise, every decision calculated to minimize risk and maximize impact. Her team encountered a squad of heavily armed Viren soldiers attempting to infiltrate the city's energy hub. Lyra assessed the situation in seconds, giving orders to her team to flank from 2 sides while she created a diversion. Energy rifles fired, and the Viren soldiers were caught off guard, trapped in the narrow streets that Lyra had chosen. The humans fought with skill and coordination, and within minutes the enemy squad was neutralized. Back at the command center, General Kale watched the battle unfold through holographic displays. "She is incredible," he muttered. Not just a princess, she is a general, a strategist, and a warrior. Lyra's mind, however, was already moving forward. She knew that the Viren Dominion would adapt quickly. If the humans did not strike decisively, the city could be surrounded. She dispatched several squads to intercept enemy reinforcements, using the terrain to channel them into kill zones where turrets and human soldiers could strike with maximum effect. The Viren Dominion's main fleet began to descend into the city's atmosphere. Massive ships moved in formation, casting long shadows over the streets. Energy beams rained down, destroying barricades and buildings alike. Civilians were evacuated to safe zones, but even from a distance, they could witness the courage of the soldiers defending their homes. Lyra led another strike team through the city center, targeting a critical command ship that coordinated the Viren attacks. The streets were chaotic, with debris, smoke, and energy fire filling the air. Lyra moved swiftly, guiding her team with clear commands. They used the city's architecture to their advantage, leaping from rooftops and ducking behind walls to avoid enemy fire. When they reached the command ship, Lyra devised a plan that required both speed and precision. A few soldiers would create a diversion, drawing the enemy's attention, while Lyra and a small team infiltrated the ship's control center. They moved silently, taking out guards and avoiding detection. Lyra's leadership shone as she coordinated every movement, predicting enemy reactions before they happened. Inside the command center, she planted charges that would disable the ship's control systems. With a signal, the diversions outside drew the remaining enemy soldiers away, allowing the charges to detonate successfully. The ship's systems went offline, throwing the Viren fleet into disarray. Ships began to collide or retreat, confused without their central command. The battle outside intensified as the alien forces struggled to regain control. Lyra's teams continued to strike with precision, taking advantage of the confusion. Soldiers and civilians alike began to see that the humans were not merely defending, they were turning the tide. By midday, the Viren Dominion was in retreat. The humans had inflicted significant damage, forcing the aliens to withdraw to regroup. Ardessa Prime was battered but standing. Soldiers cheered, exhausted but triumphant, while civilians emerged from shelters to witness their city still alive. Lyra, covered in dirt and sweat, stood among her people. She looked over the city, seeing the bravery, the resilience, and the hope that had carried them through the fight. This was not just a victory of strength, but a triumph of spirit. The humans had shown that courage, intelligence, and determination could overcome even the most advanced alien force. General Kale approached, bowing his head slightly in respect. "Princess, you have done what no one else could. The soldiers followed you not because of your title but because of your courage and leadership. Ardessa Prime owes its survival to you." Lyra shook her head, her expression calm but firm. "It was not just me. Every soldier, every citizen who stood and fought made this possible. I only led them. The true strength lies in the people of this city." King Alaric joined her, his eyes filled with pride and emotion. "Lyra, you have shown the world what it means to be a leader. You risked everything for your people and you have saved them." "I am proud of you beyond words." Lyra smiled faintly. "I did what anyone would do if they had the chance to protect their home. Today we fought, but tomorrow we must remain vigilant. The Viren Dominion will return. Our victory today is only the beginning." As the sun set over Ardessa Prime, the city began repairs. Soldiers rebuilt barricades, restored energy conduits, and helped tend to the wounded. Civilians cleared rubble and provided support wherever they could. The spirit of the city, though tested, remained unbroken. Lyra walked through the streets, speaking to soldiers, comforting civilians, and ensuring that defensive positions were strengthened for the future. Her presence inspired all who saw her. She was no longer a princess meant to be safe. She was a leader, a symbol of humanity's courage and resilience, and a living example of what could be achieved when intelligence and bravery combined. That evening, she returned to the palace balcony, looking toward the stars. The retreating Viren ships were tiny specks in the distance, but Lyra knew they would return. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, yet she also felt a fierce determination. Humanity had survived today, but the fight for survival and recognition in the galaxy had only begun. Lyra whispered to herself, a promise carried on the wind. "We have won today, but the war is far from over. I will lead them, and together we will face whatever comes next. Humanity will not hide. Humanity will not yield." That night, as the city slept, Lyra remained vigilant. She reviewed strategies, checked supplies, and ensured that communication lines were secure. Every decision, every action would prepare Ardessa Prime for the battles to come. She knew that courage alone was not enough. It was intelligence, preparation, and unity that would ensure survival. The citizens of Ardessa Prime awoke the next morning to a city that had survived impossible odds. Soldiers moved with confidence, children played cautiously in the streets, and the people looked to the horizon with hope. Tales of the princess who had fought alongside them spread through every corner of the city. Lyra's actions had become legend overnight, not just for her bravery, but for her leadership and her refusal to let fear dictate her choices. Even in distant human colonies, news of Ardessa Prime's survival reached ears with amazement. Humanity had faced a superior enemy and stood firm. And at the center of it all was a princess who refused to be protected, who refused to hide, and who had led the charge when everyone expected her to remain safe. Lyra walked among her people once more, speaking to soldiers, civilians, and council members. Her words were simple yet powerful. "We have survived because we stood together. We have survived because we refused to yield. This is only the beginning. Humanity will continue to rise no matter the threat." The city erupted in cheers, not for a princess, but for the courage of a people united. Lyra stood among them, not above them. She was a symbol, yes, but she was also a participant, a warrior, a guide. Her presence reminded everyone that courage was contagious, and leadership was not about titles. It was about action, sacrifice, and vision. As the stars twinkled above, and the first signs of repair crews began clearing the damaged streets, Lyra looked to the future. The Viren Dominion would return, but humans had proven their resilience, their intelligence, and their spirit. Ardessa Prime had survived, not because of weapons alone, but because of the unity and determination of its people, led by a princess who had refused to be safe. Lyra whispered once more, a vow to herself and her people. "We will face whatever comes next. We will fight, we will survive, and we will thrive. Humanity will never bow and we will never hide. Today we have led, today we have won, and tomorrow we will continue to rise." The city of Ardessa Prime stood tall, its people inspired, its leaders vigilant, and its princess ready for the next battle. The war was not over, but humanity had shown that it could rise against any threat. And at the center of that rise was Lyra, a princess who had turned expectation into courage, fear into action, and survival into triumph. The human princess was meant to be safe. Instead, she led the charge.